So today's agenda, right, so it's a pretty packed agenda. Make no apologies for that. There is quite a lot to get through. There's quite a lot of detail that SAP are giving out to the market. So in my job this morning of trying to translate that for you, we're probably going to have to move at quite a pace. However, there will be an opportunity to ask questions, and I will take any questions that are lengthy and respond offline. But these are the main target areas for us to talk about this morning. So first of all, really a recap on why HANA is the strategic choice for SAP. There's a lot of investment going in. There's a lot of conversations floating around about the future of SAP applications. So we'll cover that in the first couple of points there. So why HANA is the strategic choice, and then of course S/4HANA as the future. Then I want to share with you some of our thoughts and our opinion at Intelligence as to what you can do to prepare for S/4HANA. So if you consider it to be on your roadmap, and I think after this morning you probably should be considering it to be on your roadmap, how do you prepare? How do you know where it's coming on your roadmap? And then if you want to, how do you accelerate along that roadmap? And then, as I say, some questions at the end. I am joined online this morning by an able assistant who is monitoring the questions. So if there are any short ones that come up, we'll take an opportunity to address them as we go through. But if not, as I say, we'll address them in full at the end. So look, let's start and let's have a bit of a recap and really frame this idea of why HANA is the strategic choice for SAP. Now, I have to say, as always on these presentations and these webinars, what you're hearing is my opinion. Now, my opinion generally is the opinion of Intelligence here in the UK and generally the opinion of Intelligence globally. But it isn't necessarily the opinion of our colleagues at SAP. So if you do spot any differences or you hear anything different in what I'm saying, then by all means call me out on it and ask me about it. And I will try and respond in a public blog as well, so that everything's open and transparent. Okay, so let's take a brief step back in history. I mentioned my experience with HANA stretching back 4+ years. So let's go back to 2011 and the initial release and the initial launch of the HANA technology into the market. Now, the point underneath there saying the in-memory platform, well, this is worth mentioning and just taking a moment over. So SAP, and particularly Hasso Plattner and a lot of his post-grad students that he works with, have been doing a lot of research work into the future of enterprise applications and the future methods and approaches that could be used by organizations to deliver the next generation or the next revolution, if you like, in business applications. And it was obvious from very early on in that research that in-memory computing needed to form a core part and a core function of that capability. And really that's for two particular reasons, and I want to talk on those briefly now. So the two innovations that were really propelling this, number one was around hardware. And again, this isn't a webinar sponsored by Intel, so I'm not going to spend huge amounts of time talking about these hardware innovations. But in essence, I think we're probably all aware, if we work in IT, that over the past number of years, the types of processors that are available for us to run both on desktop pieces of kit, but also within our servers and our data centers have changed massively. So the advent of very large multi-core architectures with massive parallel scaling, where we can have blades which are able to deliver huge amounts of performance, this has allowed us to really make a step change in the amount of computing power that's available per pound. And when we combine this with the ability to address very large volumes of memory and also the falling cost of memory, it meant that it was much more realistic for us to deliver large-scale, high-performance computing at a much more cost-effective price. Now, when we combine that with the straightforward innovations in comparison around database technologies, so swapping from rows to column stores, utilizing compression techniques, the ability to remove aggregate tables because of the power that we have within the hardware to be able to calculate the aggregates we need on the fly, and then the move to insert deltas rather than doing traditional updates that we'd see in normal databases. Those two things combined really were seized upon by Hasso and his colleagues and his students as the basis for what would become the HANA platform and the HANA technology within the future SAP products. So those two innovations really propelled it. And back in 2011, the question was really, well, if this is going to be the future pillar or the cornerstone of what SAP do, how do we get it into the products? How do we get it into the technologies, and how do we leverage it? So the challenge initially was, how do we do that in a low-risk way? What applications do we know of within the SAP suite and within the SAP stable that could benefit from this kind of performance increase without radical rework and without a radical leap of faith by the customer base? The answer, of course, Business Warehouse. Now, many customers were struggling with performance on Business Warehouse and a perceived lack of agility around Business Warehouse deployments. So Business Warehouse 7.4 on SAP HANA, a fundamental proving ground for HANA as an appliance to run these kind of data-intensive activities. Now, the benefits to doing that were seen by many customers, and I think BW on HANA was at the time one of the fastest growing applications that SAP had. Now, we're talking here about the move away from traditional multi-layer data warehousing activities and moving much more towards agile data modeling capabilities, including the evolution of the layered scalable architecture to LSA++, the reduction of complexity that goes with that, the ability to reduce storage because you're not holding all of the aggregates that go along with a traditional data warehouse, and therefore the increase in performance and agility that you can expect from that. So really, what we saw and what we heard from the market, and certainly what the analysts were saying, was that BW very much proved the point that HANA was a technology that could be utilized and could be taken further forward. Now, in this little history lesson, I'm not spending a lot of time talking about the various sort of side-loading opportunities that there were for HANA and the opportunities that there were around things like COPA accelerators and those kind of things. They were all very valid, but I think they were all leading towards this next item, which of course was to say, well, let's run the business suite on HANA. So if we can run BW and we've proven that the HANA technology works, what about using it in a transactional rather than an analytical workload? So this is where Business Suite powered by SAP HANA comes in. So you may be confused, and you may be forgiven actually for being confused, because there was a lot of mixed messaging, shall we say, around Business Suite powered by HANA. Now I used the long term there, SAP Business Suite powered by HANA, because that's what SAP were referring to it as when it was first announced. But as with all these things, there were a number of other names that you may have come across in the market, because to be honest, there was a lot of confusion. And I think some of that was coming from the analyst community. I think some of that was coming from the press. Some of it was certainly coming from SAP. And I don't think that ourselves as partners are blameless in this activity either. But look, the simple reality of this is we are talking about the same thing here. We're talking about taking SAP Business Suite and all of the modules and all of the components that it can contain and running it on SAP HANA as the back-end database. So really, if we throw all of that away and let's focus on the facts. Replace any DB on the back end with HANA. So whether you're running Oracle, SQL Server, DB2, whatever, replace it with HANA. Immediately benefit from the performance increases from moving to in-memory. Now, some of those increases may be noticeable, long-running reports that you may have had, or they may not be noticeable. You know, a transaction that currently takes half a second, accelerating down to a quarter of a second. You're not really going to notice that difference. What you would notice, though, was reduced data footprint. So using the compression techniques within HANA, you would see the size of the database reduce and fall. And of course, access to HANA optimized transactions. Now we'll come back and we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in a short while, because I think this is an area that many people still underestimate and haven't necessarily appreciated. Of course, everybody's aware of Fiori, the new user experience that's been built for SAP applications. Many people, I think, are also aware that the full range of Fiori apps are only really deployable if you're running a HANA environment. So if you move to HANA, Suite on HANA, you get that full range of Fiori applications. Delivering operational reporting, again, we'll touch on this in more detail in a little while, but this is a key benefit that we see for many, many customers. We come across countless implementations of BW, where BW has only been implemented in order to deliver operational reporting. So we'll talk in a little while about how that can change fundamentally using something called HANA Live. And of course, the potential to run your transactional processing and your OLAP processing, i.e. your BW workload, on the same platform. So in other words, not duplicating your BW data onto a separate database. And again, that's a key strategic message for those of you who are involved in BI or data warehousing initiatives, and we'll come back and talk about that a little bit later. So let's start and go back to point number 3 on that list and talk about the reduced data footprint due to compression. Now, some of you may be familiar with an initiative called SAP Runs SAP, which is where a team within SAP produce materials, presentations, webinars, and talk about their experience running SAP inside their business. Now, the example here shows you the effect of SAP moving their ERP, says they're on NEDB, I believe it was running on Oracle, and moving it across to ERP on HANA, and the benefit there from the new storage engine only, okay? So the difference there, the drop from 7.1 terabytes down to 1.8 terabytes. Now, this is just based on the compression benefits of moving to the HANA database. So this is no optimization of the database schema, no removals of redundant data. This is just looking at indexing strategies. Let's move on to one of the next points. I talk about these optimized transactions. I'm guessing a few of you on the call may be familiar with VA05, the classic sales orders transaction within ERP. So on the left-hand side there, we've got the VA05 running within NEDB environment. And you can see there's relatively limited search and filter fields that I can work with. On the right-hand side is that same transaction in a Suite on HANA environment. Let's be clear here. So in a new environment, Suite on HANA, pulling up, whether it be NetWeaver Business Client, SAP GUI, whatever, executing VA05 will produce the screen on the right-hand side. So you get a more detailed screen, many more search and filter fields that you can use with real-time results. So let's just talk about disruption for a moment. Now, many people use disruption and many people will kind of change their perception of disruption and what it means. So let's talk about back-end disruption. Clearly here, there's been a project to migrate to Suite on HANA, away from a traditional normal database model. But from a non-disruptive perspective, the end user still fires off the same transaction, probably takes them 10-15 minutes to get their head around the new options and features that are available on that transaction, but ultimately, little disruption for the end user in their day-to-day activity, but they get a huge benefit for being able to execute these new style transactions. As I say, there are many, many new transactions, many amendments to existing transactions. You can check all those out in materials if you've got access to Service Marketplace. You can get hold of these documents. If you haven't, please raise it as a question and we'll forward them to you afterwards. But you can get a feel for how these improvements will run through your system. Okay, Fiori. I won't spend a huge amount of time talking about the Fiori applications because, well, to be honest, the Fiori webinars that we've run over the last 6 months or so have been some of our best attended webinars we've ever run. So I'm assuming that most people have heard about Fiori. If you haven't, again, raise a question. We can take that offline. Suffice to say, the new user experience for SAP is not what you would necessarily expect and not what you would have been led to expect in the past from previous SAP user experiences, in quotes. Okay, so HANA Live. One of the challenges we often see is the issue with people getting operational data out of ERP. How do I get compelling reports and compelling insights, dashboards, etc., straight out of ERP? Often, as I said, the route to that was to dump that data out into something like BW, with all the delays and the lags that go with that, because really operational data should be real time. So HANA Live is the answer to that. So within HANA, when you deploy Suite on HANA, we can deploy a set of virtual data models known as HANA Live. So these are sets of database abstractions or views, if you like, that can be extended and modified to deliver real-time operational intelligence on top of your ERP data. So for example, we have a whole raft of schemas and of course some default analytic content to help you get started. We've recently deployed this with a customer and seen huge benefits here, and I would say save them the requirement to deploy BW for operational reporting. They will still deploy BW both for their BPC workloads and for some of their more complex analytical reporting, but their operational reporting can now solely come straight out of SAP ERP running on HANA. Now this poses an interesting dilemma for us, especially those of us like myself who come from an analytics background, and I know there's a few of you on the call this morning who also are from an analytics background. This is I suppose this is quite a complicated picture, but it's also a very challenging picture. On the left-hand side, traditionally how we deliver OLAP or analytical type workloads, we separate out the transactional processing from the OLAP, be that data warehouse, be that business warehouse, be that whatever you want to call it. And typically, unavoidably with that, is a delay in that data. That data is decaying. It's running out. It's not current. It's old. The new world, the potential on the right-hand side, is to subsume all of that into the HANA platform and do all of that real-time data plus the analytical workloads on the same data set, and even bringing in data from other systems and holding it in that embedded BW model within Suite on HANA. Okay, so the end game, therefore, when we build this picture up, is a fully featured platform, a platform that can deliver the in-memory database, the embedded engines for things like predictive analytics and big data integration, and the HANA Live schemas to promote that operational reporting, plus the sidecars, the business suite, warehouses we talked about, and other non-SAP datasets if you wish to, all wrapped up at the top with your classic SAP interfaces, if you still want to use them, the modern Fiori-based interfaces, and of course using the open source UI5 toolkit from SAP, any other user interfaces that you want to build and create. So really we see a true open platform. So you can access the data in HANA through a whole variety of different connectivity options, ODBC, JDBC, OData, etc. A true open platform with more SDKs than you can shake a stick at, to be honest. So that brings us really to the first three key stages completed. HANA as a technology proven, HANA under Business Warehouse proven, and then Business Suite on HANA proven. So where do we go from there? Now, this is the interesting part for me as someone who, I suppose, in all honesty, gets paid to watch SAP and try and interpret what they're doing and what they're trying to position. For me, it was logical when the Business Suite was released on HANA that SAP really looked to combine these new Fiori applications and the access to real-time data in HANA Live with an opportunity to simplify the data that they hold at the back end in the database. And I thought I saw many pointers to how they were going to do that. And sure enough, in 2014, we were introduced to Simple Finance powered by SAP HANA. And what is Simple Finance? Simple Finance is the first step into the new generation of SAP business applications. So we'll talk about specific naming terminologies and market brands and all of those things in a little while, but suffice to say, this is an application built from the ground up targeted at finance users and the finance team, delivered solely on HANA. So what's core behind that? So let's just take a moment. For those of you who've got a SAP finance background, this will be familiar to you. For those of you who haven't, hopefully we'll keep it at a level that it makes sense. So if we look at traditional SAP ERP, finance information is typically stored in two different documents. We have the finance document and the controlling document. Now, historically, we had to do a lot of work within the database, and a lot of the complexity within the SAP database was there solely to provide the totals, the indexes, to support financial and management accounting. So we had to pre-calculate a lot of data. So opening balances, closing balances, summaries at different levels, different account level summaries, different customer level summaries. All of these things were held in order that the system could run in a stable fashion, i.e. a performant fashion. So you can see that blue arrow at the top of the diagram there, pushing across, because all of that work that was going on was predominantly about providing performance, stable finance solution. But what that means is that the flexibility for us to change the way it works and to drive quick analytics and flexible analytics was lessened somewhat because of the fact that we built and designed for performance. However, in the simple finance world, what we present is a single logical item, the universal journal entry, and all aggregations are done on the fly. That means we remove all of that pre-design and that effort that was there solely for stability and performance. Because now the HANA platform, to be blunt, can deliver a huge brute force attack that will allow us to perform those aggregations on the fly. Now that gives us huge amounts more flexibility. So for example, we can open up HANA Live. We can give people real-time access straight into that finance data across all of the data. We can also let them drill down. We can let them build combined transactional and analytical interfaces where we can see the trends and the detail and perhaps the plans, the forecasts next to the detailed transactional information. And there are a number of benefits that come along with that. Much, much easier to harmonize your internal and external reporting when we've got a single universal journal entry. I've mentioned more flexibility in the reporting and analysis. Reconciliation massively reduced complexity around that. Also, because we remove all of that indexes and the totals and things that are in there, we can simplify the model. We can take out that data. Now, this is a key benefit when we're using an in-memory model like HANA, because the less we store, the less memory we use. The less memory we use, the less memory we have to buy. Therefore, the cheaper the architecture and the cheaper the deployment. Now, of course, this really leads into the word that SAP use a heck of a lot, which is simple. So this is what we mean by simplification. We're talking about removing entities and items out of the data to make it easier. And we're also talking about a simpler approach to analyzing and working with data and working with applications. So there are three ways in which really I think these things come to bear for us. So the first one, we've talked about this, the instant insight. So we're in-memory enabled, so we can analyze and work very, very quickly with this data. Secondly, because we now have this simplified model running on HANA, we can, of course, deliver new user experiences. Historically, building these kind of user interfaces, getting the data into them would have been problematic because we may have had to pre-aggregate data, we may have had to write specific ABAP routines to get that data and work with it. Now we can dip in and we can pull that data in real time straight out of our HANA system at the back end. And of course, this also opens up the possibilities, and we won't drill into this in too much detail in this session, but the possibilities for different deployment models, perhaps non-disruptive deployment models, as we've already talked about. And of course, reaching across all of the key functions of the finance team. So let's just take a few moments just to drill into some of those areas in a bit more detail. Now, one of the things which is key to my heart, because I think I hear about it all the time from customers, the frustration around the user experience. Business intelligence, I still look down the number of customers that we have and the number of customers that I talk to and interact with in sessions like this. And I'm still amazed at the level of, or the lack of level of penetration of analytics into these organizations. I understand in the past that implementing analytics has not been an easy thing for SAP ERP customers to do. And I understand that moving from some of the traditional technologies into the SAP business objects arena hasn't been one of the easiest things to do. But I must stress this, and I really must stress this really strongly. Moving to Suite on HANA and implementing HANA Live will radically change your perceptions of how you can deliver business intelligence within your organizations. So whether it be using Analysis for Office, the screenshot there, the integration point into Excel, or the Lumira Agile Visualization tool, or Business Explorer, or Design Studio, whatever you want to use, you can radically change the experience you can deliver to your users. And ultimately, with BI, that is the arbiter of success. It's whether it's adopted and whether it's used. That's the only metric that matters. And the ability to reach out and deliver this stuff without months and months of development in Business Warehouse and other areas is a huge benefit. And I would really recommend that you reassess that for yourselves. Then, of course, I suppose somebody's got to pay for this. And being able to deliver an improved management experience, particularly in finance, is key. So anecdotally, there are very few CFOs and senior finance managers that we've shown these new finance cockpits to who haven't wanted them. And I think that's the proof in the pudding, really, with these things. If you show it and people want to use it, that means we're doing the right thing. So for me, these renewed managerial roles, fantastic. Role-based, not having to walk through loads of transactions, getting straight to the detail that the managers need within finance. And then, of course, something for the people who spend their days inside SAP, working with SAP. The renewed transaction roles. Now, these aren't necessarily just the transactions I was talking about before. These are new Fiori simplified applications that deliver role-based activities. So you can see them listed there: general ledger, clerks, accounts receivable, AP, collection specialists, dispute specialists. Applications built specifically for those individuals. So when we conclude then on the basics around simple finance, we've got the HANA platform. So not just a database, the predictive, all of those things that go in there. We then have Business Suite running on top of it, and we have SAP Accounting powered by SAP HANA. Okay, that is what I've just shown you. Now, simple finance as a whole allows you also to plug in additional modules. So if you are a treasury management user at the moment, then you can run the new SAP Cash Management application. And if you currently use SAP BPC, for example, you may want to look at the new integrated business planning applications. Now, if you want to know more detail on those particular applications, we will have some webinars coming up at a later date on those, and we'll also be covering them at our conference in a few weeks' time. Most importantly, these applications deliverable across all platforms. So whether you're on phone, tablet, laptop, browser, traditional desktop, we have the responsive design that means those applications work across all of those platforms. Okay, so that was simple finance. So let's, as it says, let's keep this simple. We're talking about a suite of Fiori applications, a simplified data model at the back end by taking out the data we don't need anymore, and leveraging the capability of HANA to ensure that those applications we build are more featured and more functional and are more role-based than they've been before. Now, if we take that principle and we extend that across the other modules within the SAP suite, you could start to see how some people would say that's like a new product. And indeed, that's what SAP are saying. Now, this is the controversial point. If you listen to what the analysts are saying and what SAP is saying to the market, then you could be forgiven for forming one impression. And I'm not saying this is wrong, I'm saying this is about interpretation. Yes, S4 HANA is new. Yes, it's the fourth generation of the business applications that SAP have been running. Yes, it's based on the in-memory platform. And yes, there are, in SAP's words, lots of new opportunities to reimagine what you're doing. As if imagining it once wasn't enough, you can reimagine it. And I don't disagree with any of those things. I think all of those things are absolutely true. And those are all things that SAP need to say, because SAP need to be bold in the market and SAP need to capture their imagination of both existing customers and prospects that they have the capability to deliver the next generation of applications. But my view of that for existing customers is slightly different. For existing customers, you don't really care about what the analysts are saying necessarily. You don't really care primarily about the message for new customers. What you care about is the message for you. So let's keep it simple, our type of simple. This is the next ERP suite. It is a new product SKU. This is something that will have a price, okay? It is HANA only. You have to purchase HANA and you have to migrate your existing database away from any DB onto HANA. These are new applications. They are different. Some of them not so different because they're like some of the Fiori apps that you can get hold of at the moment, but some of them are very different. You will have full legacy support. You can run your existing SAP. What does that mean? That means if you implement Simple Finance, and we'll talk about that in a little while, you can still fire up SAP GUI. You can still use NetWeaver Business Client and you can still trigger your traditional application transactions, okay? So you can run both on the same system. But the upshot of this is you need to think very carefully about the impact, what it means, and how you should approach it. So let's walk through what a transformation might look like for a typical install-based customer. So I want to make an assumption here, and I apologize for making this assumption, but I make it nonetheless. This story starts with EHP7 on any DB. If you're not on EHP7, your HANA journey can't start. And to be brutally honest with you, what we're seeing, for a lot of customers, the migration to EHP7 is more complicated than the migration to HANA. So I'll put that out there, I'll say it unashamedly. We've seen it in a number of customers now. Often, the project, the heavy lifting, the testing, etc., is more involved on a migration up to EHP7 than it is the migration of EHP7 to DB on HANA. Okay? Now, once you've got DB on HANA, then you have the opportunities to begin to look at deployment of the Fiori applications that leverage HANA and potentially looking at HANA Live and embedded BW. And of course, important, there may be a conversation there if you're already running BW on a separate platform, but we can come back to that a little bit later on. You then have the opportunity to then implement Simple Finance if you wish to. And I've put it on top there because effectively that's the way that it works. It's on top of your existing ERP stack, and it gives you the opportunity to run these new applications. Then, of course, over time, more simple modules and more reduced data models will become available as the S4 story matures. So let's talk in more detail. Remember this from earlier on, this diagram about SAP runs SAP. So we've added an extra block in there now. So the move from ERP on HANA, 1.8 terabyte, down to the S4 HANA. Somebody sent me a text message. Should have turned that off. It's probably my wife telling me I'm taking too long. If we look at this model, the SAP system on the left, the orange bar, that was not just a pure finance system. That was a logistics system and everything else you can imagine. So the purple bar is the result of the simplification of the finance modules only. So in other words, there's still some unsimplified source data in there relating to logistics and the other modules. The expectation is that when S4 log, S4 logistics comes through, that would shrink to less than half of that 0.8 terabytes. So let's say what that means. That means a global enterprise business as complicated as SAP running its entire operations on less than a 500 gigabyte database. Phenomenal. So what's available and what's coming soon? Right now, Simple Finance 1.0 was available since October 2014. Depending on who you ask, some people say September, but let's stick with October. Simple Finance 2.0, SP1, just gone general availability. I read on the way in this morning on the train. And Simple Logistics 1.0 is expected in Q3 of this year. Now, these are SAP numbers. I'm going to share these numbers with you. There is clearly momentum in the marketplace for Suite on HANA. We, in our install base, we have a number of customers who are genuinely intrigued and genuinely considering, and many of them on the path to actually migrating to Suite on HANA this year. And I'm guessing the 25, 26 plus of you who are signed in this morning are thinking a similar thing. And what's heartening for us is that more than 50% of those are actually indirect customers. Now, what does that mean? That means customers who are partner-led, not SAP-led. And the projects that are being delivered, more than 65% of those are actually being delivered by partners. And if you come along to our conference, you can meet customers from our customer base who are implementing and who are piloting these things. And we can talk to you in more detail about that during those sessions. But there is momentum. And there are some links there, which if you get the slides afterwards or you get the recording, there are some links that you can look up and see some of the glossy, well-presented SAP messages behind those various stories. So look, this is the evolution and this is where we are and this is the statement. So what does the future actually hold? How do you go about preparing for S4 HANA? Well, look, this is where it gets very, very important. Because in reality, making no decision is actually making a decision. What do I mean by that? SAP have moved, have moved the vast, vast bulk of their development dollars into S4 HANA initiatives. What does that mean? It means if you want the new functions, you want things other than just fixes and technical updates, then you need to be thinking about moving to that HANA platform. The future of SAP application development and innovation is all around HANA. So if we compare in this chart on the right here, what we're talking about is if you stay on the traditional path, you will build and you will develop capabilities that you will need in your core platform that will not be delivered to you by SAP. So your cost of ownership will increase and you will miss out on the innovations and the value that's being delivered through what will become the core SAP development stream. So the Suite on HANA, the S4 HANA development path. So very, very clearly, SAP has said traditional ERP on NEDB is supported till end of December 2025. No problems, okay? But they are not committing to making any innovations available on those platforms in that time frame. So you could find yourself on a legacy run-out platform. You could find yourself on that. Clearly, SAP could change their mind, but in Hasso Plattner's words, if this doesn't work, we're dead. They're going all in on this path to HANA. So listen, we're very well aware, and I personally am, having visited a lot of customers over the last 3 or 4 years, that there's a lot of negative sentiment out there about HANA in the market. I think some of SAP's go-to-markets in the early days, by their own admission, didn't necessarily help, really pushing speed all the time beyond looking at the possibility to reinvent business processes or deliver new interfaces didn't help. So we're aware that when you start to have a HANA conversation in your organizations, It's not necessarily an easy thing to do. So here's some thoughts just around how you can kind of get at that conversation from different angles. So rather than starting to talk about HANA, why not talk about some other things? Why not look for these things within your business? Because they can all drive trigger points to HANA. So an interesting one, and one that we still see time and again, is people who use SAP ERP and say they can't do a certain thing. Now, historically, I think if you're in the position where your job is to keep the lights on with SAP and not massively change it, but keep it running, you may find an excuse to leave the room as quickly as possible when people start to talk about things that SAP can't do. But I'd encourage you to explore those conversations. Get your business talking about the things that they want to be able to do that they don't perceive they can do, because that may lead you into conversations about the new SAP and about the new things that can be delivered. If you're running BW or reporting heavily in your environment, look out for performance issues. Look out for people complaining about not being able to do certain reports when they need them, or how long it takes to rebuild cubes in BW, or those kind of things. Listen out for customer demands that are dictating real-time data. Often the requirement for real-time doesn't come from within your business. It often comes from outside your business. Often the people who work inside your business are content, or they've got what I like to refer to as learned incompetence. You know, over a period of time, they just accept the way things work and they don't ask for the new things. So be aware of the demands that come from outside the business, particularly around real-time. If you're thinking of changing your hardware for your SAP applications, be aware of how long you've got left on your hardware. When you're planning on refreshing your hardware, are you thinking of renewing your hosting arrangements? All of these things can be opportunities to get the thin end of the HANA wedge into your organization. Have business users seen the new SAP? Have they seen Fiori? Have they seen the way that BW can be used in these environments? Right, I had to get this in somewhere in the presentation. We're playing buzzword bingo out there. Here's another one for you. So, is big data on the agenda in your organization? Now, we're not drilling into the big data roadmaps around HANA in this presentation. Again, if you want to know more about that, we will have subsequent events, and we will also have sessions at our conference. But suffice to say, HANA is not the answer solely to big data from SAP, but it is an intrinsic part of it. So if you have big data initiatives in your organization and you're looking to get them off the ground, then please take the opportunity to have a look and see how HANA can help you in those workloads. Of course, even traditional BI, and we talked about this earlier on, so please don't ignore the way that it can impact on traditional BI. And from a business applications perspective, I would massively encourage you to run the business function prediction report. So if you're not aware of this, this is a report that you can run. Get in touch with us, we can help you run it. It will help you understand what functions your business uses and what can be used in the future. And also the business scenario recommendations report, the BSR report, the report that will help you understand how your SAP system is used currently and the impact of moving to HANA. So two very powerful tools. I make the offer to you now. If you want to understand how to run those, reach out to us and we can help you. So let's look back at our migration path again. Our recommendation within our intelligence is that you consider moving to the HANA platform as quickly as you can. Why? Well, number one, if you want the innovations, you need to get moving and thinking about this. But number two, from a commercial perspective, there are some real benefits to doing this. Now, this is the only real sales related slide that's on the session this morning. This isn't me trying to sell you something. This is me making you aware of something that SAP are doing. So right now, you can license HANA for your environment at 15% of the value of your SAP real estate, okay? And for that 15%, you receive the runtime licenses for HANA to sit underneath your entire business suite and business warehouse. You can also access a 6-month maintenance holiday on those licenses to enable you to plan your migration and work on your migration. And in addition, there is a promotion running at the moment that allows you to get what they call the S/4HANA Foundation for free. That is the Simple Finance modules. Okay? Now, our strong recommendation at the moment is to move to HANA and consider the Simple modules. But please do not think that if you move to HANA, you have to deploy Simple. You do not. You can do that when you need to. Okay, so what's the impact of making that change? Well, it shouldn't break things that you've already got. That doesn't mean you shouldn't test, and that doesn't mean there aren't tools to help you, but it shouldn't break the things you've got. So you don't have to change your front end if you don't want to. You don't have to roll out Fiori. You don't have to implement Simple. You can reuse your existing application servers, and the sizing will be valid. Although you may be able to get away with smaller ones, but you won't need bigger ones. What does change? You've got to move your database. I told you this earlier on. You move your database to the SAP HANA platform, and you need to review your custom-built ABAP. There will be opportunities to refactor and improve, and there are tools available, and there are online training sessions and help available, and if you need to, we can help you. What you don't have to change, you don't have to change your data model underneath if you don't wish to. So how can you get there quicker? Look, I've said to you very simply here, our recommendation, get on board the HANA innovations and set the right foundation for S/4HANA. So if you utilize the option to go to HANA now, you can go with Simple when it's right for you, not before. You do not have to move to Simple Finance now. You can move to HANA now and get the benefits of things like HANA Live, the new transactions, all the Fiori apps, etc. So we have some enablement packages. I'll put these up. I won't talk them through in detail because, of course, it's not a selling webinar. It's an awareness webinar. If you're struggling to get proof of concepts up and off the ground, we can help you with that. You don't have to purchase the HANA licenses in order to do that. If you want to run that both for BW or ERP, we can do that. One of our major large customers at the moment, currently running a suite on HANA, private cloud proof of concept in our Malaysian data center. Very low cost, allows all of their users to look at and test thoroughly what their system would look like running on HANA. And of course, if you want to, we can host and take on board your full production SAP environment in the cloud. And I know we already do that for some of you who are on the call anyway. So just to give you an idea, I mentioned it there, we've got some tools and some techniques to accelerate the migration of these production SAP environments into our cloud. And you can see there, 14 weeks is not an unusual elapsed duration for that kind of project. But I'll leave you with that. So listen, to reinforce, you can move to HANA and suite on HANA. For me, that is the important thing. Simple, very interesting, possibly compelling for some of you, undoubtedly compelling for all of you in the future. But divorce and separate the two things right now. You can make the forward step into HANA, deploy the Fiori applications, get benefit from the increased and improved BI, radically change the way that you approach BI and BW, and prepare yourself for the future innovations. Get on the right foundation. But you do not have to deploy Simple now. Okay, so recap. We started off, we talked a bit about why HANA was the strategic direction for SAP. A little bit of a history lesson, but I'm still surprised actually a lot of the time when I talk to customers, many people who aren't aware of the background and the evolution of HANA, if you like, and the different workloads. We talked about the full platform. We talked about the implementation of the benefits to build these new applications, with Simple Finance being the first. We ran through Simple Finance, covered that hopefully in a level that was okay for you. And then we went on and talked about really what S4 means. maybe you might think some forthright opinions in there on what it actually means, but as I say, we're very clear on this. It is the future of SAP, but don't think that it has to be your future right now. Getting onto the HANA platform is the correct thing to do, and gaining the benefits from the reduction in data that you store, the increased BI, etc., etc. We talked about the potential for this innovation gap to open up, and for me, that's a real thing to be aware of. SAP are bringing many more innovations to market, and I think the pace of change in businesses is accelerating, and I think more and more I hear customers wanting to implement new solutions. It's going to be easier to do those, and in some cases impossible not to do them if you're on the HANA platform, right? So if you're not on HANA, you're going to find it impossible to deploy many of those innovations. Okay, so we talked about things to look out for that might help you to start to build a business case, and we gave you the recommendation of where to go right now and to start thinking about that conversation around HANA because of the way that SAP is structuring at the moment from a commercial perspective. Talk about the impacts and talk about some methods and some routes that you can use to accelerate that change, and how you might choose to get us to help you if you wish to. So look, that's it for today's webinar. If you want to reach out to me directly, feel free to email me, or feel free to publicly harangue me on Twitter if you need to. But that's it for today. So thank you very much for listening. Enjoy your day.